Tech by Tips.
Hello and welcome to another Tech by Tips video. First of all, I want to thank two donors to the channel, and these people are Gregory Jacobs and Joshua Van Horn. Thank you very much for your donations to the channel. They're very important and you are rock stars. You keep me motivated and you support us so that we can continue focusing on delivering quality videos for you. Now, today's video request comes from Jesse Sambro 9535, and his request is actually a little old. It's been in the queue for over 6 months, I believe. And he says, can you do a video on how to set up MakeMKV or Handbrake to convert movies and TV shows from ISO format to a format supported by Plex? I'm struggling to set this up. Thank you very much. Alright, so let's go ahead and cover this request. And for that, we're gonna head to GitHub, and we're gonna be using this specific repository because I found that they have a very useful image in Docker Hub and it's been used by a lot of people. So we're gonna rely on this because it looks like it's a very stable and useful container. We see that this application has been released a lot of time, 87 times. It's on version 25, so that's really good. It lets me know that they are working on this. It's pretty recent, the changes to it. And this says that this is a Docker container for MakeMKV. And then you say, what the heck is MKV? Well, fortunately for us, he has a link here to the MKV project. So if we click here and we open that, it says that MKV is a one-click solution to convert videos that you own into free and patent unencumbered format that you can play it anywhere. So basically it is a converter, or called a transcoder. So the difference is that, for example, when we talked about a transcoder like TDAR already had a file format for video, and then we just converted the quality of that video, for example, from X264 to X265, which is a better compression that gives you the same quality but with a smaller file. This is different because this converts from one format to another. So basically in the request that we got, they're talking specifically, I have ISOs, like let's say for example you bought a series of DVDs or Blu-rays or something like that, and you have the actual disc that you own, and you want to be able to convert those discs into files that you can then feed into Plex, and then you can watch the content using Plex. So that makes sense because you cannot feed an ISO normally to Plex to play the videos. So you have to extract those video files from that ISO and then put it into something else. Could be an MP4, an MKV, an MWV, whatever file that is a video file that then Plex can understand and then play for you. So that's what MakeMKV does. And it is mainly, I believe it was originally created for Linux, but now it's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. So that's pretty good. It's available for everywhere. But, we're using a NAS. We want to store all our stuff in the NAS. We want to keep everything there. So instead of having to install this in your computer directly, this person is wanting to have this set up in the NAS. So it's easier for them to just do everything there in one place. So we're going to do this using the container created by JLEsage. And here's the repository. Basically tells us that, he's using a VNC client or some kind of virtualization to run the application inside a container. It's very similar to how Calibre runs. And then you have a user interface that is exposed on the browser, so you can access it from your browser like if it's a normal application. And basically there's a lot of stuff here. I'm not gonna go over this because it's too much. The main thing that we need to understand is the folder structure, because the interesting thing here is this container, you could actually, if you only have the disk, you could pass a drive like a DVD ROM or a Blu-ray ROM to the container to then read directly from the disk and do the conversion. But if you don't have that or you don't want to do that, then you can just convert your disk into an ISO format. There's a lot of programs for that, for example DVD Fab and others. So in my case, I'm going to be running the example with an ISO created using DVD Fab from one of my favorite series that I own. And you need to know that there's going to be some directories that you have to pass. We need to store the configuration of the application in one place. We need to put the ISOs in another location, and we need to have a folder where those video files are going to be dumped once it does the conversion. So basically that's the main information that we need to be aware of from here. And again, if you do have a DVD drive or a Blu-ray drive that you can pass to the container somehow, then you have to specify the device ID. We're going to go ahead and then create the folder structure that we need to have this application going. But first, let's go into the Docker Hub repository. As you can see, this image has been downloaded more than 10 million times, so it is pretty useful. A lot of people are using it, and that's what we're going to be using. The same information that we saw on the repository is here, and important, it tells us that we can access it on port 5800. So that's another thing that we need to know. So let's go into the NAS and work on this. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to go into the file station, and I'm going to create a folder structure here. You already know that in my Docker folder, I have a folder for my containers and a folder for my projects. And in the media, we need to specify a directory that we're going to use to store those ISOs and then the resulting MKV files. So for that, I'm going to create a folder here named retail under media, so HTPC media retail. And then under here, I'm going to put two folders. One folder is going to be the ISOs, and the other folder is the videos. So I'm going to drop my ISOs in here, and then once the application processes the files, it's going to dump it into this folder named videos. And now we're going to go into Docker, into containers. We're going to create one for a MakeMKV. This is where we're going to be storing all the configuration stuff for the application. And then for the project, we're going to create another MakeMKV directory here for our Docker Compose file. So now we have all the folders and all the stuff that we need. Now we can start working on the project. So let's go into Container Manager, Projects, create a project. And I'm going to name this MakeMKV, and I'm going to pick that directory for my project that I just created, and I'm going to say I'm going to create a Docker Compose file in here. I already have an example, so I'm going to drop it here, and then we're going to make some changes later. So then we go next, don't start a project, done. Then we can go into the project and to the YAML configuration, and here I'm going to explain what our Docker Compose file does. Alright, the first thing is we're defining one container, which is going to be MakeMKV. And I'm going to name that service MakeMKV. I'm going to be using the latest image from that repository that I mentioned, which is dl/MakeMKV. I'm going to name this container MakeMKV. And then the environment variables, there's something here that I want to point out that is important. I have my usual time zone, in my case America, New York, but normally we use the PUID and PGID to run the container as a user in the NAS. But for some reason, the creator of this container decided not to use these names for the variables, so we're not going to be able to use this. I'm going to delete that, but I wanted to highlight that. He decided to use user_ID and group_ID. So we need to follow what that person selected. So that's going to be 1026 and 100, which is the default first administrator when you create your Synology NAS for the first time. If you're going to use a different user, again, you need to log into the NAS via SSH using that specific user. Then you run the command ID, and that will give you these values that you have to put here. And now we're going to specify the volumes. That's the folders that we're going to pass from the NAS to the container. And like we said, we need three locations. We need one location for the configuration. So in my case, we have this folder here in containers called MakeMKV. So we can copy this path and then make sure that we replace this with that. So now this folder in our NAS is going to be mounted in the container in the /config. Now for the storage, we need to make sure that we have those folders that I mentioned here. So HTPC media retail, and then we have the ISOs. So we can copy this path here and make sure that we have that in here for the storage. And then for the output, it's going to be exactly the same path, but ends with videos instead of ISOs. And now we have the place where we're going to put our ISOs and the place where the application is going to drop our videos that we can then pass on to Plex. And finally, the container is going to be listening on port 5800, and I'm going to expose it in my NAS on port 5800. You can select any other port that you want if for some reason you have this port being used, but I'm going to leave it as it is. And this is all that we need in the Docker Compose file to be able to then run this application. So now we should be able to just build this project. So let's go and click save and then say build and start the project. In my case, I already downloaded the image, so you don't see the pull. but it says it's running and exit code 0, so everything is good. The project is running, so we should be able to clear the messages here and then go into the containers, and we would see that inside MKV, when we go to the logs, we have good information here that let us know that the service has been started and it is listening, and we don't see anything else that is additional in here, so everything is looking good as far as we need in here. So now we should be able to go into the IP of our NAS, which in my case is 10.0.0.73, and then I'm going to put the port 5800, which is the port that we specified for this application, and then we get this user interface. Like I said, this is a virtualization of a runtime environment similar to what we have with Calibre. So this is running basically the application that was supposed to be for Linux, so the Linux version of the application, as you can see here, and it's for x86-64 processors. So that makes sense. We're running a Linux container inside a Linux machine, and now we have everything that we need here. Now, I did notice that when you try to set changes here, sometimes it doesn't want to save them for some reason, you see? That's why we strictly use the values that the creator of the container specified, like the /output as the place where we're going to store our files, and the config is the folder. So if we try to change that, it's going to be a problem, because for some reason, even if you grant permissions to the container, it kind of doesn't behave well. So we stuck to what he said. Now in here, we see that it's going to drop our videos into the /output, which we mounted into that videos directory, and then it's going to store the configuration of the application in /config. This is the part that seems like it's failing, but it's okay. Then IO, we tell it we can retry 5 times if you cannot read something. The language, I'm not going to change it. I'm going to leave it at the default. Protection, I'm not going to change anything, but this should give you options here to remove any kind of protection that is in the disks. And the integration, there's nothing to do. So honestly, you don't have to do anything here, so you can cancel out of this. I have put the first disk converted into an ISO using DVD fab into the NAS so that we can have something to show. So if we go here into the NAS, we can see the 2 folders, and then if I go into ISOs, I have my disk number 1 of the collection of the Silverhawks DVDs. So now I have something here to convert, and then on videos, this was me testing before, so ignore this one, but it's gonna create another folder where it's gonna drop the things. So now we have something in there. All right, so how do we use this application? Unfortunately, I have not found a way to make this run automated. So basically, if you have an ISO that you want to convert, you have to log in into the user interface and do all of this manually. But I mean, it's not really that bad. It's a very simple process. The issue is that you do the conversion yourself, and then once it is converted, then you have to grab those files and move them into the downloads completed sonar if it's a TV or anime, on downloads completed radar if it's a movie, so that then your Rs can pick those files, and then move them to the right place so that then Plex can see those files in the final destination. Or you move them yourself into the Plex folders and then it'll work. So yeah, we have an ISO, so if we click here on this icon to open files, then you'll see that it immediately opened in the storage, which is the folder that it expects by default. So it sees my ISO, and here you can see that you have a lot of different formats that you can convert. You can convert from ISO, from MKV, from DAT files, VTI, VDMB. I mean, there's a lot of formats, but in this specific case, the person was interested in the ISO, so that's why we have that. But if you select the top one, it still recognizes the ISO, so that's fine. So I'm going to select this, and then it's going to read the ISO. Like I said, in my case, this ISO was a conversion using DVD fab from the actual disk, so that's why it gives me this weird message saying that sometimes that can produce errors, but that's okay. I'm going to click OK, and now it's reading the contents of that ISO. And as you can see here, it recognized 33 chapters. So this is if you want to put everything into one single file that contains all the episodes in this disk. If you want it in separate files, then you can uncheck this, and then you have the separate files here. So you can see it has all the different files. So up to you how you want it. If you want one big file that has all your episodes, you can select the first one. If you want to break it down into different episodes, then you can select the other ones. So I'm going to select it broken down into different episodes. And then here, the output folder, as I said, it's by default going to select output, but then you can change the name of the folder that you want. Let's say I'm going to leave it as Silver HD1. So that's the DVD 9 version of the Silverhawks content. And this is the disk number 1. So that's going to be the folder that I'm going to find once I do the conversion. And then I can just go here, click the MakeMKV button here, and then it's going to start saying, okay, I don't see that folder. Do you want me to create it? I'm going to say yes. And then it's going to start doing the conversion. If we go into the folder in our NAS, and we refresh here, we go into videos, you see that it created the Silver HD1 folder where it's going to be dumping the files. So if we go here, we see that it's already started the conversion. And we see like the first episode, it's already dropped in here. And you see if you refresh that it's increasing the size because it is processing it. So the file gets bigger and bigger until it's done working with it. So let me give it a little bit of time. And there we go, it's done with the first file, and now it's working on the second file. And we can validate that this worked if I just double click this and I check if the file is playing. As you can see, it is playing the video. I'm gonna stop it here. I don't want to get any copyright infringement notices on my video or anything like that, but it's just to check that it does work. So that content that you bought, that you have the DVD for, you converted it into an MKV file that then you can feed into your Rs to rename it and all that, and then it'll move it to the final destination in here in the media directory. For example, this is a TV show, so it will probably belong into the TV folder. So the way I would recommend you do this is you go into the file, you rename it to something that makes sense and that the Rs can recognize. So in this case, I would put this something like Silverhawks Season 1, Episode 1. And then dump that into the HTPC downloads completed. And then since this is a TV series, Sonar, I would put it here. And then I would go into my Sonar application and then scan for those files if it doesn't automatically recognize it. And then import it. When it imports the files, then the application will immediately grab all that and dump it here into the TV in its own folder for Silverhawks. So basically that's how you would go. It's a little bit of a manual and tedious process, yes, but if you have the media and you want to be able to use it in Plex, that's how you do it. And this is a pretty fast process. As you can see, we're already down to the 8th episode, and I believe it's 9. So it's pretty fast. It's not that cumbersome to do this. So yeah, that's how you use, and here we go, this is the completion. Copy completed, 8 titles saved. So we click OK, and that is done. You have converted a DVD into different MKV files that you can consume using Plex. So that's going to be it for this video. I hope you found it useful. If you did, hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so, because that helps us grow and that helps us to get access to a lot of nice things that will make us create different content of good quality for you when we get sponsors and stuff like that. And remember, all of these videos that I'm making them because of requests from people in the comment section below. And I prioritize the requests from donors of the channel. So the people you saw me shouting out in the beginning of the video, I try to put those videos first. But even if you don't donate to the channel, I'll put it in the queue and eventually I'll work on making a video for you on the content that you want. So feel free to write in the comment section below. I also try to help out the people whenever they have any issues with setting up the stuff. I know it's complicated for a lot of people that don't have the knowledge on how Docker works and how containers work and stuff like that. So I try to help you out on that. And again, you should have noticed that you didn't get an ad on my videos. And that is on purpose because I am not monetizing the channel. That means that you don't get the video ad, but I also don't get any money from the effort that I put into making these videos. So if you like the content and you found them useful, I'd appreciate it if you go into the link in the description below to PayPal and you send me a donation. That'll be really appreciated. You're going to be shouted out in the next video, and that's going to help us to continue to focus on the channel and give you more quality content. So that's going to be it for this one. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.